Good morning and a warm welcome to KBC News Check. News Check is a program that ensures that we keep you afloat with all the latest happening in real time. And speaking about real time, the Dutch King and Queen are here. That's the Netherlands royalty, His Majesty King William Alexander and Her Majesty Queen Maxima are in the country for a 4-day official visit. And as we speak, they are currently in a closed-door meeting with President William Ruto at State House, Nairobi. And as soon as they are out and to address the press, we will be there to ensure that we keep you afloat with what is happening. And on the second hour, we will be looking at that in depth. What are the mutual benefits to the two countries? We know very well that the majority of the horticulture that we have in the country goes to Netherlands and other European countries. What are some of the benefits? Culture, trade, climate change. We will be looking at that in the second hour. But on this first hour, where you sit, maybe you could agree or disagree that governance in the country needs propping up. And that is why even in county governments and also in national government, that is something that we are always struggling to ensure accountability, away from corruption, and also beefing up governance. And that is a discussion that we'll be having on this first hour. And allow me to rope in my guest. My guest is FCS, Jeremiah Karanja, who is a Chief Executive Officer, Institute of Certified Secretaries. Karibu sana Bwana Karanja.
Thank you.
And maybe to put all this into perspective, what is the mandate of the Institute of Certified Secretary, and especially in beefing up governance in the country?
Thank you. The Institute of Certified Secretaries is a creature of the law, Cap 534 of the laws of Kenya. We are a public entity at the National Treasury. We are a professional membership association. In this country, you have various professional bodies which have mandate on various issues. We have professional bodies dealing with issues of accounts, HR, law. ICS, or the Institute of Certified Secretaries, specifically deals with matters governance. And therefore, our mandate is around governance. Our members, who are called certified secretaries, they work in various sectors. In state corporations, they are called corporation secretaries. In county governments, we have board secretaries to county public service boards. In private companies, they are called company secretaries, and so on and so on. So when they are working in those institutions, they are charged with the mandate of ensuring that that organization adheres to high ethical standards and good governance practices. That's where we draw our mandate.
And for the context of this discussion, we'll be breaking it down to ethical leadership. We're looking at the challenge in governance. We'll look at the role of secretaries in good governance. We'll look at maybe a case study. We'll be combating corruption, devolution and county governance, and also youth and education, technology, transparency, and also the future outlook. But before we delve much into this topic, allow me to just touch on some of the things that as KBC Newsroom we are looking at. Other than the Dutch King and Queen, as they begin their 4-day state visit to Kenya, we also have the Universal Health Coverage Regional Health Promotion Conference that kicks off today, and also the 2025 Budget Policy Statement. We have the Finance and Budget Committee meeting, National Treasury, CS Mbadi. Let's now delve into the conversation in depth. My co-anchor on the sign language interpretation is Lucy Mwaura. Thank you indeed so much for actually outlining that, especially when we talk about, and in your names, you have a CS, more or less like what we have engineers, ENG, doctors, DR before the official name. Maybe you can clarify this, FCS, what does that mean?
Yes, the designation CS is short form for Certified Secretaries. Every member or every person who is a member of the Institute of Certified Secretaries is called CS, Certified Secretary. And for you to get that designation, what you require is that you need to do a few exams with KASNEB, that is Kenya Accountants and Secretaries National Examination Board. Once you finish your exams with KASNEB, then you'll be admitted to be a certified secretary. And therefore, every member of the institute is called a certified secretary. However, the title they acquire depends with the position and the organization which they are working in, because there are those certified secretaries, but they are working in those other organizations in different other capacities. So CS is a professional name for certified secretaries. Yes.
And I think also journalists, we should be having something, maybe a JR someplace.
Yes.
But thank you for that. And I'm looking at how your organization defines its role in fostering ethical practices and also leadership in good governance in the country.
Yes. The Institute of Certified Secretaries has partnered with a number of stakeholders, key among them being institutions in the public sector, to promote governance. The best example I think I can give is a document we call Muongozo. Muongozo is a code of governance for state corporations in Kenya, which the Institute partnered with the Public Service Commission and the State Corporations Advisory Committee, SCAC, to develop Muongozo. And for the last 10 years, what actually we've been doing is to capacity build state corporations, the boards. Whenever they are appointed, we take them through an intensive program where we induct them on the provisions of Muongozo. Actually, as a matter of fact, next week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, in Naivasha, we'll be inducting all boards of state corporations. Every member of a board who has not gone through the Muongozo induction, we'll be taking them through that induction. But also, in addition to that, we tailor-make very specific programs for individual organizations.
No, so it's not only in the public sector?
No, it's not only in the public sector. Even private organizations. We have worked with SACCOs. We have worked with CMA for purposes of listed companies, and so on. So that is one of the contributions. The other contribution in terms of shaping governance, we run a program we call Champions of Governance Awards. Champions of Governance Award is a program where we go to institutions and assess how they are performing in terms of their governance practices, whether they have proper governance structures and policies, and then we give them a report on the areas that they need to improve in. And then they also compete amongst themselves. And this year, 2025, we have actually started the registration. Just again to support whether it's a church institution, whether it's a SACCO, whether it's a listed company, whether it's a state corporation. Over the years, we have also partnered with various other stakeholders on one of the important aspects you've mentioned about youths. And we appreciate that if we don't inculcate good practices amongst the youths at their age, then we'll have a challenge in future as a nation. So the Institute, with support of other partners, developed a program we call GEMIP. GEMIP is Governance, Ethics, Mentorship, and Internship Program, where every year we take 100 students who are passionate on matters governance and ethics, and we take them through an 8-month program where we are able to connect them with ethical leaders who are able to mentor them and also give them internship in an effort to promoting good governance. And finally, is one of the programs that the Council of the Institute will be launching soon on what we are calling governance pro bono services, because we appreciate that sometimes some of the institutions who require governance services are actually struggling in terms of budgets, and therefore we are looking at how can we support them even if they don't have money to engage a governance expert to help them out. And as an institute, we think that is a contribution that we should be giving to the nation. Yeah.
And it's a good thing that you've mentioned the COG award. You're in your 13th year last year.
Yes.
We'll be talking about that so that we may also put into context what exactly, in terms of county leadership and also national leadership, how we can be able, you know, every time we hear an award, people strive to get that award because it's a stamp, or it's a seal of authority and also a seal of ensuring that, I was saying that indeed we are working towards ensuring that we have good governance and we really need it in the country. So I'm looking at how you would describe ethical leadership in the country and why is it that it's critical for our national development?
Ethical leadership, by definition, I would say, is value-based or principle-based decision-making, where as you make decisions, as I retreat as a CEO in my office, and I'm thinking about the society, the decisions that I'm making, I should know that I'm holding the lives of several people in my hands, and therefore the decisions I make today are affecting real lives of people today and generations to come. And therefore, I should prioritize the general good over my own personal interests. So issues of ethical leadership is not about what the majority think. It's not about when I'm talking in public, but it's about my morals, when I'm alone, my integrity, when I'm making those decisions. When we are in the board setup, in case of an organization, we are meeting as a board, the decisions we are making, are they based on morality or integrity, knowing that they are decisions to affect current and future generation? But most importantly, ethical leadership is also about talking about a concept which is very important called sustainability. Sustainability is when the decisions you are making now are beneficial to the current generation, but again, they are not negatively affecting the future generations. Because if we can make decisions just for short-term self-gratification, but they are not going to be beneficial to the future, we are eating our future, we are eating our tomorrow today. And therefore, that is unethical as a leader.
Yeah. And it's a good thing that you mentioned morals, because doing the right thing at the right time for the right purposes, even when no one is watching. But unfortunately, when it comes to corruption here in the country, actually, that's something else, because even the corruption index worldwide and even the region, we are not doing very well. Beyond legislation, other than the laws that we have, what practical strategies do you advocate for reducing corruption? Because we've even devolved corruption now.
Of late, I have been studying a lot about corruption. And there is a concept I have been studying and developing, which I call stupidity of corruption. I think in our country, I would say our corruption has reached the stupidity level. It's like now you are stealing food which is meant for your children. Your wife has cooked food, kept it, and then you go and eat the food for your own children. So your children are dying of hunger because you have eaten their food. And it's not that you don't, because the interesting thing about corruption, people don't steal because they don't have. In fact, the people who are most corrupt sometimes are those who have most of the resources. There is a good story given in a book called the Bible, in the book of Genesis. It talks about Adam and Eve. They were given all the fruits in the garden, but they are told, don't touch this, the forbidden fruit. But you know, even before they tasted all the others, they ran to the forbidden fruit. They left everything else. So corruption is like that forbidden fruit. Somebody has a lot, but still they want to steal from the poor. So that I would call it stupidity of corruption. There is a good book written. It's called Psychology of Stupidity. And when you read it, actually you appreciate where you are as a country. It's a sort of stupidity, or even a better one, written called the Ship of Fools and Stupidity. It actually talks about how Ireland, the economy of Ireland, collapsed because of leaders who that time were unethical. So people are stealing from themselves. So how can we deal with this? I think is what we talked about, the issues of morals. We need to start right from our education system, being vocal about morals. But secondly, we also need role models. People who are actually, and media, I want also to challenge you. Maybe you also need to highlight a number of people who are doing very well in terms of leadership. They are ethical leaders, they don't steal. So I know sometimes in our news and everywhere we are just focusing on, and unfortunately I did a bit of communication in university. I know that bad news sell. Unfortunately for us, even for me, when I open the TV, I think if you are telling me about an ethical leader, most of the time people just go to what is not working. That is the unfortunate thing about the society. So we don't highlight people who are doing the right thing. And I think we need to dedicate intentionally, because media shapes society, intentionally dedicate time to focus on people who are doing the right thing, so that the young people who are growing in the universities, in our schools, know that it's not everyone who is corrupt. There are people who have decided you better go to jail but be corrupt. But also, secondly, our education system, we need to inculcate, to teach right from the very young age, kindergarten, all the way to the university, the issues of morals. As an institute, I mentioned about the GEMI program, the Governance, Ethics, Mentorship and Internship program, and which we are calling on partners to come and partner with us. And that is our way of contributing to this debate about morals, because we think if we are able to shape the young people on the issue of why they need to be ethical leaders, when eventually they occupy those positions, we will have a better society tomorrow. Yeah.
It's a good thing that you have that program, because my next question was, what are you doing as ICS in regards to the corruption agenda? But more specifically, let's go to the counties, devolution. There's more or less autonomy in counties as opposed to what we had previously. How can secretaries ensure that we have ethical resource management and prudence use of resource management? Because you have seen cases in court, corruption corruption cases in court. We have seen even secretaries even being charged.
Yes, this battle about corruption is not, it cannot be won by just one. I call it is usually an unholy trinity, where you have professionals involved, you have government officers involved, you have business people involved. That's the trial is the one which, without that, if you remove one of them, corruption will not be the way it is. But also let me correct one narrative. Sometimes we talk about corruption in the devolved unit as if that's where corruption is. Actually, when you look at our national budgetary allocation, you appreciate only less than 15% go to the devolved units. But sometimes we like creating this narrative that actually money which has been stolen by the devolved. And that does not justify that. And I'm not trying to say there is no corruption in the devolved units, but I think that sometimes is a narrative created by anti-devolution people who want to show us actually devolution is a vehicle for corruption, which I don't agree with. The issue is, as a society, we have a challenge with what you talked about morals. So whether it's we are talking at the national level, whether it's at the devolved unit, it's the same people, it's the same Kenyans. So what we need to do is the same thing. This campaign, we need to support institutions who are involved, who have the mandate of anti-corruption, key among them being EACC. Strengthen those institutions, work with them. And as an institute, actually we are discussing with EACC on partnership because we would like to support them. Specifically our agenda in that is the ethics part of it. Because governance, one of the key elements of governance is ethics, and our mandate is governance. And we want to support EACC on the issue of ethics, that if we can promote ethics so that as people make decisions, they are making based on ethical standards. But also finally on the same, the Institute is also in discussion with the Council of Governors, on collaboration still to support the counties, and we've been doing so, especially through capacity building in terms of governance, so that those who do the wrong thing, they should not at any given time give an excuse as because they didn't know. At least you know, but you have decided intentionally to do the wrong thing. And therefore, the consequences, when they come on you, you should not, it should be an obvious thing. We are also looking at, when you look at the devolved governance structure, because I mentioned our members are trained on matters governance and ethics. That's what they are trained on, what they are regulated on. So we are also looking at how can we have these governance professionals also in those county governments. For instance, when you look at the county secretary, for example, it's not a requirement that they be certified secretary, they be governance professionals. Yet that is a very key role on matters governance. So one of the things we actually propose in some of those positions, which are people are providing governance services, they need to be members of relevant professional bodies, in this case ICS as a governance professional, so that we can hold them professionally accountable.
So you're saying there are some county secretaries in some counties who are not members of your institution?
The law as it is now, the County Government Acts, requires the secretary, all secretaries to county public service boards to be members of our institute. It also requires the managers, who are also the secretaries, to urban areas and cities to be members of the institute. The law currently does not require necessarily the county secretaries. The county secretary is the equivalent of maybe at the national level, the head of public service. The law does not necessarily require them to be members of our institute. But even those ones that the law requires, you still find one or two counties, like for instance for the urban areas and cities, you still find a number of them who are governors who are appointing people who are not professionals. And the whole thing is they don't want people who can be held professionally accountable. So that is one of the areas that we are working with counties to ensure they comply. But also for future legal review, we also propose that some of those positions we play a key role on governance, like the county secretary, should actually be professionals.
Yeah, and that's a good observation, because if we look at engineers, they have their own institution. Even lawyers, you cannot practice in Kenya unless you're an advocate of the High Court.
Sure.
You cannot be a surveyor unless you are a member of the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya. And I'm looking at these challenges because at the end of the day, just as you said, the secretaries are like the head of public service in counties, which is a big role that they play. And if at all they are not members of a certified institution, that could be a big loophole, because at the end of the day, if something comes up, you as an institution, you will also be involved as well. Just like we see advocates, you know, if something happens, you know, the body comes in, the Law Society of Kenya comes in.
That's true. That's true. Yes, you know, one of the things we need to appreciate as a society is the place of professionals. Sometimes we don't appreciate professionals and we think it's a cost. But if you think governance is costly, then you try misgovernance and you realize the mess that we are going through now. For instance, even giving an example in the built sector, where you have buildings collapsing every day. And it's because somebody somewhere thought getting an architect or an engineer is so costly, I can just get somebody from River Road and go and help me in the construction. It's cheaper that way. But then within 1 or 2 years, the building comes down and kills a number of people, property is destroyed. So what you are trying to save, actually you have incurred greater loss. And that is the concept of sustainability we are talking about. So the role of certified secretaries, we should not only look at it from a cost perspective, that this person, for them to hold this position, they require to undertake a certain course, they require to be regulated, they can be taken through disciplinary action if they misbehave. So we should look at the benefits that accrue out of that. And part of the governance challenge, even in boards, in organizations, you have some organizations where you find the CEO, like myself, I'm also the secretary to the board. That is poor governance, because when you do that, you concentrate power in one person. The role of a board, we say, is dual role. One is the strategy. Strategy is about implementation of the mandate of that institution. And the CEO on day-to-day basis should be thinking about the strategy implementation. But then you need somebody else to support you on governance. Governance is about, as you are implementing that strategy, are you implementing it, one, in accordance to the law, two, in accordance to ethical principles for sustainability and the good of everyone. So that is the role of the corporate sector or the company sector. So institutions who have this dual role in one person, that is not good governance. So what needs to happen is you separate the two roles. You have the CEO mandated to deal with matters strategy, and then you have the corporate sector to deal with matters governance. And I can tell you for sure, even in the SACCO sector, of late we have seen a number of scandals in the SACCO sector, and that is one of the single contributions to that, because you have a situation where the board does not get the full picture of what is happening at the institution, because what the board secretary does, or the corporate secretary is supposed to do, before the information comes to the board, the secretary, the corporate secretary is supposed to assure the board that the information you are receiving is sound in terms of the law, is sound in terms of governance requirement, is in line with previous board resolutions, is in line with the institutional policies. When you remove that, then you allow information to come to the board before it is sieved. So the board itself is exposed, because they are making decisions on information they don't have a guarantee that this information is actually sound in terms of the law and governance. And therefore is a huge debate to ensure that in all our institutions, whether it's the county governments, whether it's the state corporations, whether it's the SACCOs, the private companies, all of them, you must have a corporation secretary, a company secretary, who is the board secretary, to provide the governance assurance required to the board. Yeah.
And what are some of the challenges in implementing good governance in the country, and where do professional bodies like ICS come in to address this?
One of the challenges that we have in implementing good governance is what I would say, there is a story in a book called 1 Kings chapter 20. There was a king called Ahab, and this king one day wanted to go to war, and he called his prophets to tell him whether he should or should not go to war. 400 of them in total told him, you should go to war and you will win. But then one of his friends to this king told him, why don't you ask just another opinion, because it is very unlikely that 400 people are giving the exact message. So he sought advice from another prophet called Micaiah. But even as he was going to this prophet, he was saying, I don't like this prophet, because sometimes he tells me things which I don't like. But he was urged, just listen to him. So he called him. And even as he was calling him, he gave him strong warning. When you come, you must say what the others have said. But the prophet said, no, I will not say what the others have said. I will say what God has spoken to me to tell you. So eventually when he came before the king, he was asked, should I go to war and will I win? He said, yes, go to war, will you win? He told him, no, just tell me the truth. He told him, if you want me to tell you the truth of the matter is that you should not go to war, because if you go, you are going to lose, and you are going to be killed in the battle. The king, of course, did not like that. He slapped Micaiah in order that be detained. And he said, let him stay in prison until I go to war and come back victorious. But Micaiah told him, unfortunately, the king, if you go to the battle, you are not going to come back alive. You will die in the battle. He went to the war, and as fate would have it, he died there in the war. Now, in leadership and in governance, you require people who can stand true to power and say, well, because when you look at, for instance, the corporate scandals we are having in this country, do you want to tell me there was no one in that organization who could see what is happening, that the books are being cooked, all this is happening? What was happening in those institutions? You have a leader who has surrounded himself or herself with 400 prophets who are just singing his tune. They are just a choir, just telling him, if you are the CEO, you are the best, and they can't tell him the truth of what is happening. What you are doing is wrong.
Yeah.
That is the story of the one that is given to ask who will tell the king that he is naked. The king is going out without clothes, but no one is courageous enough to tell him, King, you are naked, because they are fearing if we tell him, he's going to cut off our necks. So one of the things that we must do in governance to implement good governance is to have this culture of speaking out when things are going wrong. And part of what we train our members, the corporation secretaries, is they must be courageous enough, because in the boardroom, the corporation secretary is not just a silent listener, just listening to the board discussing. They are supposed to actually to contribute and advise. Actually, their role number one as a corporation secretary or a board secretary is not to take minutes. Minutes can be done by anybody. Is to advise the board on matters governance. And therefore, when things are going wrong, they must be like Micaiah and tell the board that what is happening is not right. It doesn't matter whether it's the CEO doing it, whether it's the chair of the board doing it, but that must be voiced out. Because one of the challenges we've had in this country is the issue of whistleblowers. People who have volunteered themselves to come out and speak against the ills happening in the society. Sometimes we hear they have disappeared. Sometimes they end up their lives very miserable. They have been fired from their institutions. And I know there is a legal framework being worked on in terms of whistleblowing protection, so that we have this culture even in our institutions where we are not all a choir just singing to the tone of the leader. We should be able to objectively as professionals, whether you are an accountant, whether you are a certified secretary, whichever profession you are in, because you are a professional, you must stand on your professional ethics and say what is right, notwithstanding the cost.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the cases that we have seen, and let's say one of your members is not practicing good governance or is caught up in a scandal just like we've had. Actually, the SACCOS thing has eaten a lot of money, and a lot of people want answers. What as ICS do you do in case a member goes rogue?
Under the CPSK Act, Certified Public Secretaries of Kenya Act, Cap 534, we have an independent tribunal called the Disciplinary Committee. And what the Institute has done over the years is to subject members to that process. And where they have been found culpable, that committee is independent of the council per se. That committee actually takes disciplinary actions against such members, errant members. Now, the issues of corruption sometimes can be very complex, or misgovernance, because one, the role of the company secretary, as I said, is to advise. When you give an advice can either be taken or ignored. So what we seek to find out from this member is, did you give that advice? We want evidence that they provided advice. They took necessary actions to ensure that the ethical issues in that organization have been dealt with. If they have dispensed with that obligation, professional obligation, then the buck stops with the board, because ultimately in an organization, the organ responsible for matters governance is the board. As the board secretary, what you do, you support the board by providing them with the professional advice, including supporting them in reviewing the relevant governance policies and procedures. Among the many processes and procedures is to ensure there is a proper internal audit process, which should also have raised some of those issues. So you as the board secretary, if you have done that, then the rest is a criminal issue to go to our courts of law for the courts to determine who exactly is culpable in this matter.
Yes, and do you have a case study where a secretary intervened and protected finances or resources from practices, and how do you protect such a whistleblower?
Yes, we have a number which I may not want to mention here, but yes, we have a number of our members who have been very courageous.
No need for names or even companies, but yes, a situation where
yes, we have a number of members who have arrested such situations, both in public and private entities, where either is the CEO who, the information they are giving the board is misleading. And for a board of directors, especially in public sectors, board members don't work in those institutions. They only come quarterly for board meetings. So as a board member, I may not know the nitty-gritties. Beyond the board paper that I'm receiving, I don't work in that institution. So I'm expected to make a decision based on the board paper that I've received from the CEO. So we have members, and actually that is what they do on a day-to-day basis, who have raised those issues. Advise the CEO, this information need to be edited this and that, but the CEO decides to ignore. So what you do as a board secretary, you do your professional advice to the board, looking at the law, looking at the ethical requirements for this organization. This paper is deficient because of ABCD. But also secondly, we have also had members in some of those even cases which have gone even to court. One of them I know went all the way to the Court of Appeal, where we had a member, one of our members who had raised again issues, where is the board itself which was involved. The board sitting in a sitting and decides to discuss a matter which was unethical and actually illegal. And the secretary gave advice, the board ignored, the secretary documented the same, and that matter went all the way to the court. But also finally, let me say this on the same, that our members, in addition to raising, because I have said they are advisors to the board, we are not necessarily to go out there to the streets and start what we do. Our advice, mostly to the best, wherever possible, we try to provide very professional advice to the board to ensure again we don't distract the internal mechanism. And in most cases, the reason why you don't see most of these issues coming out is because in most cases, actually, you're able to arrest those things within the organization. Even before they get out of hand, then they're able to be dealt with within the already existing organizational mechanism. Yeah.
And I'm looking at technology, because if we just give a practical example on the billions that was stolen from the SACCOs, I'm looking at technology being used to cook books, to manipulate figures. How are you leveraging on technology, the same technology that these people are using to maybe circumvent some of these procurement and financial processes? How are you leveraging on technology to ensure that there is, to enhance accountability, and especially when it comes to the procurement process? Because I think that is where we are lagging behind, and a lot of corruption especially.
Yeah, of course, technology, if you ignore technology, you do it at your own risk, because it's here to stay. And we must be on top of the game, as the criminal elements are using the same technology to ensure the institutions are corrupted. We must also ensure that we use the same technology, again, to promote governance. So from the institute perspective, and when I talk about the institute, I'm talking about our members who are out there in those institutions on day-to-day basis, promoting governance and ethics. One of the important developments in this century is the evolution of AI, the artificial intelligence. And that has come in very handy to facilitate our work on governance matters. Whether we are talking of providing boards with real-time information on what is happening, because our role as board secretaries, as I mentioned, our first responsibility is to the board. And one of the things we must ensure is the board is well advised. But also secondly, is also to ensure that In terms of our policies, our documentation, whether it's minutes of meetings, whether it's the issue of technology and specifically AI has come to facilitate that, because so that we have quick decision-making processes, quick turnaround time in terms of the board decision-making. So I would say that has, to a great extent, facilitated that. On matters procurement and the others, I may not want to comment on that. I'm not an expert on procurement, but I would say our work, especially on the areas revolving on the governance and ethics, whether it's advice to the organization management or to the board, we have, and the institute, by the way, part of what we do is to run capacity building, both for the boards and also for our members and also general public. And one of the areas we are currently doing is the issue of AI and governance, because it has a lot of implication, including negative ones. For instance, we have had issues of data breach, issues of breaching confidentiality requirements. So that is an area that as an institute we are focusing on the impact of technology, more specifically AI, on matters governance and ethics.
Yeah, and I remember the first instant we talked about governance, we also roped in the young men and women of this country. And I want us to more or less go deeper a bit, because you do remember in the June protest, the Gen Zs came out and awoke the nation. And they were not fighting for any political seat. They were requesting for good governance. How are you roping in youth to ensure that we have a new crop of leaders who are not only governable, they are also accountable?
The last 1 year...
just hold the thought, visit. But allow me to now wrap up this conversation. Just in case you joined us, we were looking at ethical leadership and good governance. We will be talking about the King's visit in detail in this hour, 11 to 12. But I've been hosting N.Karanja, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Institute of Certified Secretaries. Because of the interest of time, kindly, in a nutshell, how do we improve governance and more specifically when it comes to the young people? That is where we were as we wrap up.
Thank you. As we wrap up, I would say governance is everything, because we may have very good strategies, we may have very good policies, we may have everything, but when we fail to be ethical as a people, when we fail to have proper governance, then we don't have mechanism through which to implement all those good strategies.
Okay.
And as young people, what we are doing,
yes,
we are going, for instance, the whole of this year, last year, we have gone to various institutions of higher learning, including high schools, high school and universities and colleges, and to just help our young people appreciate this topic of governance and ethics. Okay. We are also doing capacity building for them. And one of them that we have is this April, 22nd to 26th of April,
yes,
where we will be sponsoring a number of young people in Mombasa in our annual conference under the theme Governance and Ethical Leadership.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are out of time. FCS N.Karanja, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Institute of Certified Secretaries, looking at ethical leadership and good governance. On this hour, we are looking at the Royal Dutch visit, and I will be hosting Ambassador Boaz Mbaya. We also have governance expert Sami Meli. We will be back in a minute.